Welcome to a new edition of Planet Waves TV. Today's edition is for Monday, the 8th of August, 2016. I hope Monday is really the 8th of August anyway, but if it's not, you can figure that out yourself. Today, I'm here to talk mostly about the Jupiter-Chiron opposition that is happening a little bit later in the week. This has been brewing for a long time. Jupiter spending 1 year in Virgo. It wraps that up on the 9th of September. And so now that Jupiter is in late Virgo, it's making a long opposition to Chiron, which is in late Pisces. And as I've mentioned before, one of the things that makes this a little bit extra interesting is that Jupiter is one of the classical rulers of Pisces, or it's the classical ruler of Pisces in the old system of Greek astrology that can be found right here on the theme of Monday. But you have to, if you're using the theme of Monday, you have to write it in because the old Eudoxus only gave us the first 7. But anyway, and at the same time, Chiron is spending a lot of time in Pisces. And while I don't use the concept of rulership for modern planets, that is to say, planets discovered in the age of science, it is clear that Chiron has a resonance with Virgo, and so we've got as a kind of a mutual resonance between Jupiter in Virgo and Chiron in Pisces, which amplifies the influence, the effect of that aspect. However, before we get there, I want to mention one other thing that I keep mentioning every week, and I will keep mentioning, which is that on the 24th, right, it's up there, off screen, on the 24th of August, we're going to go into a kind of a compound aspect, which is slowly brewing, which I've been, mentioning, which is that, as you can see here, Mars in early Sagittarius, remember Mars retrograde, all those other videos, check our channel, is about to make a conjunction to Saturn in Sagittarius. And then this is going to all be in a square to Neptune. So let's talk about this for 1 second, because it's operating in the background, and because of the involvement of Neptune, it's possible for it to stay in the background and to be invisible and then seem like it emerged like some surprise. So one of the things I'm suggesting that we do, you and me, is look for what this aspect might represent. Look for the ways that this aspect may be manifesting so you can see it early, remembering that anything where Neptune is involved can have that property of it disappears. Neptune has a way of disappearing. If you read the Wikipedia page on the discovery of Neptune, you'll see that over the centuries it appeared and disappeared and appeared and disappeared and finally wasn't spotted till the 1840s and identified and called a planet. So it has in its inherent nature this thing where it sort of comes and goes from consciousness. It dips above and below what's called the threshold of liminality. And anything in the aspect pattern where Neptune is can take on that property of going subliminal. And you don't want this one to go subliminal. You want to be paying attention to this, and you want to be venting the pressure of this before it fully manifests. The metaphor here might be like if you were to take I'm not a terrorist and don't hold myself out to be one, but let's say you were to take some gunpowder and put it on the kitchen table and flick your Bic and light it. It would fizzle and make smoke and burn the table a little bit, and you'd be, annoyed. If you were to take that same measure of gunpowder and put it inside a pipe and seal the caps and light it with a fuse, that same reaction would cause an explosion known as a pipe bomb. So if we use the metaphor of elements or chemicals or factors that behave one way when they're not under pressure, behave a different way when they're under pressure, it is the same reaction, but it's just in a different environment, in a sense, in a container. And what we have here is that reactive substance, which is Mars and Sag, quite reactive, right? It's opinionated and believes what it believes. It's driven. Notice the resemblance between the Sag symbol and the Mars symbol. They both contain a sharp pointed object, and they're both associated with some form of assertion or aggression. They are that's a hot aspect. It's kind of like that gunpowder burning up. However, the pressurized vessel comes in the form of Saturn. And what we're about to have is a conjunction of Mars to Saturn, which seems a lot like something going off inside a pressurized vessel. Now remember, most of this is psychological, psychic, mental, emotional, spiritual. It's not necessarily about the outer world, but this is looking a little bit outer worldly too, but we're not going to concern ourselves with that, really. Just follow your instincts, as we'll find out again with the Chiron-Jupiter discussion. All right, the other part is that Mars makes a conjunction to Saturn at the same time that both are square Neptune. And Neptune is a volatile substance. It is liquid, it is gaseous, depending on the temperature and the overall environment. And so we have this compound event about to happen, Mars conjunct Saturn square Neptune. That happens through a range of dates between approximately the 24th and the 28th of this month. And all I can really say is be aware of what this might represent for you. Pay attention. Notice what you're not noticing, which means just turn the other way, turn within, be mindful, and pay attention to things you're not normally looking at. Don't know how else to say that, but that's a lot of what astrology is. At least we have a clue. All right, so with that in the background, remember that the pressure is building all this time while other things happen. And now we have the chart that I really am here to talk about today, which is the chart for Jupiter, quicker moving planet opposite Chiron. That takes place on A12. Not sure what day of the week that is. Here's what that looks like. We've got Jupiter, again, the quicker moving planet, coming up to about 24 and change of Virgo, on its way into Libra. And then we have Chiron hanging out at 24 and change Pisces. It's going to take about at least another year to get into Aries. So for now, we still have the immense benefit of Chiron in Pisces. Here's why that is. So when you put these two planets together, Jupiter and Chiron, you essentially tap in. Chiron serves like a kind of a tap into the knowledge and wisdom tradition of Jupiter. One way to study Chiron, if you're a student of Chiron, and if you are interested in the minor planets as a group, it's very helpful to understand the many ways that Chiron works. And Chiron works differently in aspect to every planet, and in particular, it works with some striking beauty, you could say, in aspect to the slow-moving planets, first of which is Jupiter. And so Jupiter acts like a kind of a reservoir of knowledge and a reservoir of wisdom, and also of kind of a multi-dimensional access. And what Chiron does is it taps into that. It's kind of like a way of giving everyone a little bit extra alchemy power, or the ability to see into the subtle levels and to use your mind in a multi-dimensional way. Now, without getting into too much New Age hocus pocus, it is possible to use your mind like a simple device or a more complex device. The problem when you open your mind up to being a more complex device is that you go beyond the ability to prove things in a rational and linear way, right? So you're not always going to be able to have empirical data. And what that does is it creates a situation where anyone can say anything, and who knows, maybe it's true. We need to not do that thing where anything is possibly true. We have enough problems in the world. And so one of the things that we need is a way to ascertain the veracity of something without necessarily having linear proof about that thing. I like to depend upon a multiple source model. Being a journalist, the way you stay out of trouble and have accurate and more interesting stories is when you learn something, you don't necessarily assume that's true. You might give it the benefit of the doubt, and then you start making calls. You call up other people, you check other sources, you put on your shoes and walk around and look for things, and you have ways to verify things multiple. You check with another source, you check with 2 or 3 other sources, you go back to the clippings and you find out what was said in the past. It is possible to do this with things of what we think of as being of a metaphysical nature, for example, past life encounters of some kind. One of my guide rules, since I work with a fair number of clients and the subject of past lives comes up a couple of times a month maybe, is that I don't assume anything is true based on one reading of any kind, and that includes my astrology reading. It includes the reading of a past life person. It includes a personal discovery that was made. When we're talking about something like a past life scenario, I would start to count it as potentially real at around 3 or 4 sources. That reading lines up with that reading, lines up with that personal experience, lines up with that thing in my life that I cannot understand. And so this is a way of applying a reasoning process to discoveries that we make. And I would suggest that as this aspect intensifies, and as let's say a tap is opened into what may seem like other dimensions, prior lifetimes, knowledge that you aren't supposed to have, but you have anyway, things that you think that you have no real way to know them, but you know them. The idea I'm suggesting here is to align your findings, your sources, your discoveries with multiple sources. Check them out. So one thing to do here is to not assume, and to know when you're assuming, and to know when you don't know. Now, by the way, under the conditions of Saturn square Neptune and Mars square Neptune, which are working in the background of this and which do involve Pisces, it is essential that you be able to think in terms of sourcing your information. The past life thing is just one example, but anything that any person pretending to be metaphysical or actually claiming it and really being that, which I think most are not. I think most of this is the realm of the imagination, is to check over and over again. Ask yourself, ask your body, sit in the tub for an hour and meditate on something. Listen to what your dreams are saying. Write the thing down and see how it feels when you read it back to yourself. I'm not claiming that anything specifically is or isn't true. I'm saying we need to have a high standard of if not verification, multiple source confirmation. Now, what in reality is metaphysical? What is multidimensional? Well, it's really not that different than anything that you would normally do anyway, except that there are likely to be rules that you're evoking in some way that violate the normal rules of space and time. The problem with that is that the normal rules of space and time that we have are our most dependable and most solid way to keep some semblance of order and of sanity in our lives. Now, Jupiter opposite Chiron, Jupiter in Virgo opposite Chiron in Pisces, in addition to opening up potentially multi-dimensional, let's say, angles on reality, is also good for things like research. It's good for finding things out. It is good for picking a subject and going through all those books and finding the one sentence in each book that contains that subject. And one of the things we get when we juxtapose something like Jupiter, which is a creature of Pisces or Sagittarius, to particularly Jupiter and Pisces, in this case, a non-linear representation of Jupiter, versus Chiron, which is all about documentation. Even though it's able to make inferences beyond the documentation, the way you work with Chiron the most effectively is you gather your documentation. You organize things in chronological order. You organize things in files. You collect your documentation. And I would recommend, if you're doing anything serious, it requires that you're seeking actual knowledge, that you get this stuff off of computers and you get it onto paper, and you establish a relationship with it in physical form, because that's part of the veracity that you're looking for, is something that's going to stand up to the test of verification in the physical world. And so one of the things that Chiron and Jupiter in this position are suggesting that we do is ground our information. That means tracing it. It means understanding the sources. And then finally, the non-linear piece is going into what you might think of as a phase of pattern recognition. Rather than attempting to account for every single fact, it might be more than you can account for, to account for as many as you can account for, and see what pattern starts to emerge. This is really one of the I would say the most effective way to read astrology, but it's really one of the only ways to read astrology, particularly when you're adding in a lot of extra planets, is to look for the patterns that you're seeing rather than thinking there's supposed to be some form of linear proof. The two processes work together. The process of Virgo involves rational thinking. It involves step-by-step analysis. It involves contrasting and comparison of facts. Virgo in particular involves not assuming that you're right or not assuming that you're wrong, but maintaining an intellectual objectivity and making sure that you are fair in the way that you, let's say, count and discount certain things as supporting or not supporting a certain position that you want to be taking. Again, this works for all levels of research, whether we're talking about something as ethereal as getting a reading on a temple site somewhere, versus you're writing an article about Hillary Clinton and you want to really know whether what something she's saying is true or not, or for that matter, reading the chart of Hillary Clinton, which we're going to spend a lot of time with next week here at Planet Waves, as I open that up on Tuesday's Planet Waves FM and continue it in Thursday's edition if all goes according to the plan. So again, multiple sources of verification, not assuming you're right, not assuming you're wrong. Understanding that wishful thinking and this thing called hope, which is very popular right now, have a way of getting in the way of our thinking process. You want to maintain some measure of intellectual objectivity, which means taking a step back and asking yourself what's true rather than telling yourself what's true. It's a whole different kind of discovery that emerges when you are doing this. And the thing to bear in mind about this Chiron opposition to Jupiter is that it will open up layers of information that may not have normally been available. Apart from that, it would seem, at least from the charts, we have a relatively calm and quiet week, remembering that this may well be the calm before the storm. As we get into that last week of August, we start to really feel the pressure of Mars making that conjunction to Saturn and the square to Neptune. This can be a point of breakthrough. It does not need to necessarily just be a question of the black powder on the kitchen table versus the black powder contained inside some of a container. And the thing that is transforming could very easily be your mind. And the thing that I see this being about the most is where the biological realm, represented by Mars, a creature of Scorpio in this case because it spent so much time in Scorpio, versus Saturn in Sagittarius, which is very much a description of what you might think of as patriarchal belief. It has an affinity for patriarchal belief. That is to say, believing what you're told because the person who told you claims to have some line on the truth that you don't have. Normally, that means having a special relationship to God. And almost everyone who put those Saturn and Sagittarius beliefs into you was claiming to have some special relationship to God, even if all it means that they do is get on their knees and pray. They're assuming that this concept that they call God is going to hear them specifically. But remember, that really doesn't involve you that much. And anyone invoking spiritual power on your behalf who means it, who knows what they're doing, is most likely to do so silently, without saying a word and without making a show of it. So bear in mind that the information that's coming through now is likely to be some form of preparation for whatever these events are in the last week of August, which are then followed immediately by two things in early September: Mercury stationing retrograde, and then a total eclipse happening in very close proximity. So it's going to be a bit of a hectic late August and early September, and you're going to need some grounding in information. You're going to need to know where you stand with yourself. And I would say that knowing where you stand with yourself is the single most important thing that you can keep your focus on. You don't need to try to convince anyone that anything is true. You don't need to demonstrate to anyone that you believe that where they're coming from, but rather you need to know where you stand with yourself. The pace of things is likely to pick up. There's likely to be kind of a brisk series of turning of events. I would imagine that it would be slightly confusing or considerably confusing at different times. And if you have your center, if you have your grounding, if you have your inner faculties arranged in a kind of a group, it will be a lot easier for you to proceed and to proceed in some measure of peace and have some fun when you are doing it. There's an article somewhere on the internet, maybe we'll link to it with the various versions of Planet Waves TV, where I talk about the relationship of Virgo and Pisces in the study of astrology, which is about the ability to use factual documentation of Virgo-styled research, and also to use the ability to be intuitive, which is to know something without knowing why you know it. And the chances are that what we call intuition really is a function of something called pattern recognition. It's about observing the patterns. And so in this holographic universe that we live in, especially with this beautiful contact between Jupiter and between Chiron, do your thing and recognize the patterns. One of the things my life is patterned around right now is a project called Balance. That is the mid-year reading. I'll be taking all of these things I've been talking about, including all the things moving into the future, and that includes the Saturn-Neptune square. It includes Jupiter ingressing into Libra, which happens really soon. It includes the Chiron Fola square. Many of these other things I've been going on about here week after week in various formats, I am applying to you, to your personal hologram, and how that works by use of what's called the solar chart. I'm a pretty good natal astrology reader, but as a horoscope writer for many years, and someone who was drawn to astrology by horoscope writing. See, that's the thing. I really dig the research astrology, but it was the New York Post horoscope that made me want to be an astrologer, because it seemed so practical and so real. Now you can flip open Marie Claire and read the benefits of that. Thank you, Patrick Walker. I'm able to take that same method of astrology and expand that into approximately half-hour video presentations for each of the sun signs and the rising signs. And the way I've got this project planned, the first of these videos is going to start coming out this week, and they will come out approximately over about the next 7 or 8 days till I've covered all 12 signs. I've got a little scheme for that, how to do that. I like to do it a little bit differently every time. And by the way, if you sign up for Balance, the 2016 mid-year, you immediately get Astrology for Artists, the 2015 mid-year. Underrated, bad, gorgeous project that I did at this time last year. Okay, that is it for today. I'm going to go sit near some trees by a stream with my canine friends and call it a lovely Sunday afternoon. You know where to reach me if you need to. EFC@ericfrancis.com is a good place to get me, or write to someone on my assiduous team around the world. Good to be with you. Bye for now.